What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Tag Team, the Pokemon Trading Card Game's premier podcasting duo. My name is Riley Holbert, joined as always by my good friend JW Creewall. JW, how's it going today?
Riley, it's going okay. How are you?
It's going way better than okay, man. I'm on cloud nine over here.
Oh, really? I mean, I feel like you sound happier other days.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of like grilling me about my mental state earlier.
No, because you sound like you sounded not that happy. That's why I was asking you.
Do I still sound unhappy? I mean, it was a long day. I was working until
Yeah.
7, which was an hour and a half ago.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. For me too, it's been a long day, but I think it's mostly been due to the fact that, in the Midwest, it's starting to get real dark really early. So it's like 7 o'clock
yeah.
and it was super dark at that point. And then I felt like the last 2.5 hours I was in this kind of, I don't know, dreamlike state. I feel like
You're
I
in like
just
a
don't
fugue
even,
state.
yeah, I just don't even know like where I am, what day of the week it is, what time it is, and all because the weather is changing.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I would say in general I've been like a little down lately. I don't know if like today is abnormally so, but
yeah,
yeah, seasonal
sure,
depression certainly are like a real thing, man. Like as the daylight hours decrease, it just feels like your style's getting cramped on, you
sure, sure.
know?
Yep,
For
yep.
sure. So I
So,
get it.
so what makes you on cloud nine?
Nothing really. I was kind of saying it, kind of trying to boost the vibes a little bit.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, I'm kind of the belief, um, and this is like mental health, outstanding, but like that your attitude like informs like your reality, right? So,
Yeah,
uh, you know, if you make something good, then it'll be okay at least, right? So,
always look on the bright side of life.
but there is more than plenty going on in the world. Um, we're fresh into Players Cup 2. We gave a lot of street cred to that last. Well, I don't know if street cred's the right word, but we gave a lot of lip service to it last week. So we'll definitely talk about that. And we're fresh off of the Full Grip Online Series event number 2. So
That's right.
another successful event in the books. Super exciting to see that. So I think we can combine those two things and get a really interesting take on how the format's developing and what kind of things you can do moving forward. So
Sure, absolutely.
let's take it from the top with the Full Grip Online series. So yesterday was the second event in the Full Grip Online series, and we saw actually a pretty substantial shift in how the meta ended up shaking out at the end of the day. It was really interesting to see, actually. I thought it was really fascinating. And so Andrew Mahone took it home with the Lucario Melmetal deck. Very cool. Had an awesome gameplay there in the last round, if you saw that. Um,
Yes.
Beating Daniel Altavilla in the last round with his Psychic Mewtwo, very Malamar Mewtwo esque, but relying now on the Rotom um, from Cosmic Eclipse, I think, that accelerates 2 psychic energy from the discard on attack.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
GW, you having the overhead view of how all this was shaking out over the event, what was the cause of this shift? Like, what happened between events that all of a sudden made these decks so good? Was it they were undiscovered before, just underplayed, or was the style of the decks being played more in their favor?
Yeah, well, you still saw ADPZ and Eternatus be very well represented, but the real confusing newcomer was the Luke Metals Ashen, which, I mean, has been seeing some success recently, but it was like last week where it's really started to pick up steam, not just in the Full Grip Online series, but also in many other tournaments that are being hosted online.
Yeah.
And there was one tournament, I believe it was a Hegster tournament where there were like 6 Lucario Melmetals in the top 32, and that is just ridiculous for a deck that before that had some finishes, certainly was in the conversation, but didn't have quite the representation. And so lists are becoming a little bit better. People are discovering that the deck has a very favorable Eternatus matchup and a pretty solid ADP Z matchup, just kind of depending on certain techs in both of those decks. But having favorable matchups or at least winnable matchups against those two, while also being able to control a lot of the rest of the decks in the format, make Lucario Melmetal a really popular choice. I think also players are playing Lucario Melmetal because it can accommodate Crushing Hammer if they opt to go for that route. Andrew didn't play Crushing Hammer in his list, which is important to note. But there are some Lucario Melmetals that play Crushing Hammer, and then it's also good for just blocking generally the VMAXs, so you give yourself a shot against Scorch and Dragapult and things like that. And also, wow, I've like almost lost my train of thought twice on this. But also, you're not running these liability Pokemon for the ADP
Sure.
to just eat up on the bench, which I think is another really big benefit to this deck. It feels like there are a lot of ways for you to outplay your opponent. Like you're just giving yourself a lot of time via the Metal Goggles and the Full Metal Wall GX. You're giving yourself a lot of time to try to position yourself to win the game. So of all the decks that are being played right now, this is the least linear in its gameplay, and that lends itself to having more decisions in a game and more ways to outplay your opponent.
Yeah, I've always said time and time again that the longer a game goes on, the more opportunities there are for decisions to be made, the more likely it is that the better player will win. And I think Lucario Melmetal definitely feeds into that to a certain extent. You mentioned not having the liability Pokemon. I would argue, though, there's also the flip side of that where you don't have immediate access to certain tools via Pokemon search. And that's something that I've always disliked about Lucario Melmetal. But it does come with the big pro, though, where, now all of a sudden you get, Mawile GX turn 1, the infamous Mawile GX, and you don't feel as crappy about it. There still are, like, genuine Mawile situations. Like, if they pluck a Zacian that you can't Metal Goggles, like, that could actually flip a game for sure. But you have so much more control over how many of those guys are in your hand. Right. When you're talking with, like, ADP Mirror or something, you could easily lose the game turn 1 off a Mawile.
And not even like, and the opponent doesn't even blink an eye, because that's like actually just their strategy is to try to get you into a hand that has that has a Dedenne in it, and then they win because they just brought it out of your hand on the first turn. And so you don't have that liability with Lucario Melmetal. Of course, you can always just still get run off the board by ADP. It's not like a fail safe by any means, and I don't think the matchup is like extremely one-sided for either deck. I would consider it about a 50-50, just kind of depending on how fast each deck can get set up. But it's certainly a deck that players have started to take more seriously, and it's definitely been showing in the results. It's got obviously this win. It's done well at a number of other online tournaments, and certainly if you haven't tried this deck, it's a deck that I personally like for the Players Cup. Like, I played it a little bit myself for the Players Cup. I got a nice win in my first tournament with the Lucario Melmetal deck, beating an ADP with the help of Galarian Stunfisk.
There it is.
Attacking into an ADP for the win. And I played it a few other times and got some decent finishes, but it would certainly be a deck that I would be comfortable taking to a tournament and playing in the Players Cup.
Yeah, for sure. So, awesome deck. I'm sure all the folks who have been pining after Lucario Melmetal Zacian are feeling really good right now. There's always been that crowd, right? The crowd that always thought that Lucario Melmetal was the better way to play Zacian.
Sure,
they're on
absolutely.
Cloud9 right now, for sure.
There's definitely some merit to that. And again, the numbers right now, there are magic numbers right now of 220, 260, right, which are both kind of numbers that the Zacian and the Lucario Metal have, but then you play the tool, you play you use the GX attack, and all of a sudden you're able to kind of get out of the way of the opposing ADP Zacians. And so it's just it's an interesting deck that kind of plays with the numbers in a unique way. We also saw the Psychic Mewtwo show up. So we had 4 Psychic Mewtwo's outside of the big 3 there, ADP, Eternatus, and then Lucario Melmetal. We had 4 Psychic Mewtwo's as the number 4 played deck in the Full Grip series, which is very interesting. I got to commentate a little bit over Danny a couple of games, and the first game that I commentated over him, he was able to get a donk with the Gengar and Mimikyu, And then the second time I commentated, he was one trainer away from getting the donk on a Zamazenta. So certainly that card in and of itself, putting in a lot of work and really like, I don't want to say giving the deck viability by itself, but it's like a really strong weapon in those opening turns, particularly against Zacian decks, which tend to, start one or two Pokemon and end the turn with a really big hand. So you can take pretty cheap knockouts there early.
Yeah. I mean, that deck definitely has shown up in waves. I mean, Azul Garcia Griega really leading the charge there. Do you think there's any other tools that really set it apart in terms of the metagame? I mean, obviously, Night Watch and Horror House and Poltergeist are a really strong combination of attacks. But it didn't really show up for a while now. Was it just the fact that people were passing over the concept, or is there any sort of shift that's led to that?
I mean, I think when you look at it like always having a reset stamp or Marnie and then shuffling two cards back in, like the hand control is not something that we've seen in the standard format, and I mean absolutely harkens to the expanded format where we have Trevenant and Dusknoir that is, the tier 1 deck and expanded. So just that hand control not being something that you see too often in standard, just that's probably the best way to do it at this point in time, since we don't have a lot of the control options of the last format. Trevenant and Dusknoir can kind of take center stage as being that that card that can disrupt the opponent in a very big way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Marnie plus Trevenant and Dusknoir is definitely a potent combination. The one thing I always hate about that kind of strategy, and I don't think this deck is like inherently reliant on your opponent dead drawing off of like a Marnie,
Right.
a Marnie Trevenant Dusknoir combo. I think, but it is still so frustrating when you do that to them and they have like research plus energy or switch research or whatever they need to. That just feels so awful. It doesn't matter if it's like game deciding or not. It just tilts me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like it's gonna happen, and like you're putting yourself in that position to get top decked out of that situation, or have them have the one card in the hand that they needed. But yeah, it's gonna happen with a deck like that. That just comes with the territory.
And that's not a demerit to the deck. Like that, it's just something that happens, and you don't necessarily need your opponent to dead draw to do well with this deck.
Right.
It is definitely just a strong archetype in of itself. It's consistently done well over the last couple days at tournaments with Azul and Danny kind of leading the charge there.
Right.
That's just something that whenever I play a deck like that, I get so annoyed. So annoying.
One other result that I do want to also mention, we had a couple of Eternatus that also made the top 8, but the one surprise at 8th place at a 4-2 record, we had Aaron Flynn with their Salamence. So this is the second tournament in a row that Salamence VMAX has made a top 8. Of course, in the last tournament, David Negrete got a top 4 with Salamence, and this is pretty much the same list. I don't know, there's not too many differences here between the two, but congratulations to Aaron. Salamence VMAX, potentially not the most viable deck. I mean, certainly it's not tier 1 by any means, but it can hang, it can compete, it does some cute things, and it can hit some big numbers with the powerful energy. So
yeah, okay.
I don't know if you've thought too much about this deck, but I kind of enjoy it. It's something kind of fresh, kind of new. It's a VMAX that hits hard and sets up pretty consistently, which I like.
Yeah, never heard of a VMAX that hits hard and sets up consistently before. No, I haven't really put any effort into Salamence, but it's a deck that's really fun to watch. It's like really cool to see it executed. So props to all the Salamence fans out there. I want to pose a question to you now. We talked a couple weeks ago about kind of off-meta decks that we enjoyed, and it seems like Salamence has at least piqued your interest. Are there any sort of off-the-beaten-path decks that you've found really interesting, either in your own gameplay or from these tournaments over the last couple days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for me, off the beaten path as of the last week would have been Lucario Melmetal. It was a deck that I had a little bit of experience with, but really about a week ago, I started kind of putting some real games into it. Played a little bit on stream, played it in the Players Cup for a couple of rounds, and really have started to like that deck. We have a question in the chat about that saying, what's the key thing that sets that deck apart? Many people thought that the metal frying pan rotation would have been a death sentence to the deck, but you still have metal goggles, so essentially the same thing if you're not facing against a fire deck, and I think that really keeps it viable. And then just again extending the game for as long as that deck can makes it really hard for the opponent to win at certain times, because a lot of decks, you look at ADP, that deck really tries to go as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and sometimes the negative to that is that there are often games where they only have like one real attacker set up. They only have one Zacian set up because generally speaking, in all the other games that they played, they only really need the one Zacian. So, Lucario Melmetal plays a little bit more methodically, a little bit more slowly, and can set up multiple attackers a little bit more easily, and then have that kind of consistent staying power to be able to hit into the Zacians over and over and over again, kind of take advantage there. And so just the longer the game goes on, the better it is for Lucario Melmetal, and that's just what sets it apart in my eyes.
Yeah,
but that would be one of the decks that I would say has been kind of under the radar, I guess. Another one for me that has been under the radar that I have enjoyed and I've heard people do well with is Inteleon. I keep bringing it up.
Always comes back to Inteleon.
I know. I keep bringing it up, and it's just we're gonna have to change the podcast name to be the Inteleon Show. But I have a friend that just messaged me saying, hey, I'm doing pretty well in the Players Cup with Inteleon, and I've seen a few people post about that, and again, another nice deck that can hang with the big boys.
Yeah, for sure. I'm still stuck in Mad Party Land myself, although
get out, bro, get out.
I'm not going to take it to any Players Cup tournaments, but it is definitely my favorite deck to play. I do actually really like Pikarom, and this goes way back. I mentioned Pikarom like a while ago, right when rotation was hitting, and like using Boltund and going deep into that realm, and I think that's actually like kind of a legit strategy. Pikarom against decks that don't just immediately destroy it really sets up these very dangerous board states very quickly. Good example specifically is even against these slower decks like the Metal decks or the Mewtwo deck that don't do a lot of OHKOing action. You set up a lot of energy on the board. You set up multiple Pikaroms or multiple big GX Pokemon. You got Boltund ready on the sidelines. It just gets really scary really fast. I think it's a really strong deck right now, actually.
Well, and that's a really interesting transition. We'll get to it in just a second, but Ian Robb has actually been playing a lot of Pikarom. We'll talk about why that matters in just a second. But first, I think it's time for card of the day.
Yes. And so I'm actually doing 2 cards, but it's because it's for a very obvious reason. So
they're legends.
No, it's not a legend. Although that would be funny and a nice little follow-up to last week's Magnezone.
Dang, I love legend cards.
I do too. I wasn't playing TCG, and actually I was critically... This is in my phase of life when I was critically disinterested in Pokemon. This isn't my card of the week, but I just have a tangent about Legends. And I heard about Legends, and I was like, this is so absurd. Pokemon is the stupidest game of all time. It's just so dumb. And now I'm looking back at them, I'm like, wait, that's so sick.
Those cards were amazing, bro. The art is like chef's kiss. Like,
it's gotta feel so goofy, though, to pull half a card out of a pack.
I hope they bring something like that. I swore that would be the mechanic for like Gigantamax. Well, I guess Gigantamax is still a mechanic that we can still play, but I thought for sure that would be, VMAX.
Well, anyway, I'm featuring 2 cards, and the reason I'm featuring 2 cards is because only 2 of them exist for this Pokemon, and that is the Pichu Bros. So if you don't know me, Pichu Bros are like my favorite element of all of Pokemon, more than the Pikachus that I keep behind me on my wall, more than Rowlet. The Pichu Bros are like my inspiration in my life. Way back in the Insider forums, my name was Pichu Bro 4 because Pichu Bro 0 through 3 were taken. So
yeah.
And it actually, I think it spawned from the Pokemon Channel game where you like progressively unlocked the Pichu Bro shorts, if you've ever played that one.
Sure.
Anyway, they have 2 cards. They have one, which was a Pop Series card, And that one's really cool. It's really cute. It has just like a 20 damage flip a coin attack for 2 lightnings, and it has the 2 little bros chilling. But the better one of the two, actually, in my opinion, it was a P Series promo in Japan only, which was basically the original Black Star promos when Wizards of the Coast was publishing the game. And it has this adorable art. It's the 2 Pichu Bros. They're chilling. There's flowers. It's so wonderful. It's like there's trees around them. Like really great like desktop wallpaper if you like Pichu. And generally just the Pichu Bros are awesome, man. And it's cool that they've had a card at all. I like it when they do those little off the cuff kind of things. I like the surfing Pikachus. I like the flying Pikachus.
Do you have that card?
The Japanese one? I don't have the Japanese only one. I do have the Pop promo or the Pop Series one.
Yeah.
It's a card that I've always like kind of wanted, but just has never come into my immediate vicinity, and I'm not much of an eBay hawk, so.
Is it pretty expensive?
I don't think so. It's just I don't know actually. I could do a quick check right now because I'm curious.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Sure. I do like when they kind of incorporate kind of outside influences into their cards. I mean, obviously that's a cool thing, right? Because it pulls in different.
Oh
different
yeah, that
sources.
is expensive. and you know why? It's because it was a promo for the. I guess they're not always expensive, but some of them are.
Can I guess?
Well, the first one I saw was very expensive. Now that I'm scrolling through, I'm not sure.
Was it a PSA 10 or something?
No.
Ah, okay. Well, did you go completed listings?
Well, that's what I'm about to do.
Ah.
But the reason why my guess is it might be expensive is because it was one of those movie promo cards that you can only get in Japan by like going to the film.
Yeah.
And so this was for that. I think it was the 5th movie, the one with Latios and Latias.
Okay.
And the Pichu Bros have a cameo in that film, so I recommend seeing it for that. Just super cool though. I love those off the beaten path cards that feature something a little different, a little wacky. Really great for people like myself who just enjoy those small little things.
Sure. Well, can I guess how much it costs?
Sure.
All right. You have a number, right?
Yeah. It depends on if you want to go for like a graded or a regular one.
Is there a PSA 10 or a PSA 9 at least?
Yeah, there's a 10.
There's a 10? Okay. PSA 10 Pichu Bros.
Mm-hmm.
From what year?
2002.
I'll say 1100.
Actually, no, it's significantly cheaper than that. It's in like the $300 range.
Really?
Yeah, and like
okay,
honestly,
when you say a promo that's like 20 years old, that's a PSA 10. I immediately think more expensive, but that's surprising.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was easier to get than we're like picturing in our heads here.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I tend sometimes with like, somebody says, "Oh, it's a collector's card." I tend to like overvalue it and like compare everything to Charizard.
Yeah. Did you get any Champions Path Charizards yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. I'm hoping to. I mean, I really want to.
Have you opened any Champions Path yet?
No, I have not, bro. I haven't found any. I haven't looked, but I haven't found any.
Yeah, I haven't looked or found any either. So.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping for that second print run. Let's go.
I don't know. I feel like Hidden Fates got bought up so fast, and there was a lot of it later on.
Sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar thing.
Sure.
Who knows, though? Let's jump in, though, to our bridge. So we went from Pikarom to Pichu Bros back to Pikarom, and we wanted to talk about Ian Robb because if you were unaware, just hours ago now, Ian Robb finished his run at the Players' Cup. He did all 50 of his keys. He's done, got all of his points accumulated, and he ended up with 128 points, in his words, with mostly Pikarom in those tournaments. So, JW, what are your thoughts from there? Now we have kind of a sense of what people might be able to achieve, what the baseline might be. Obviously, Ian Robb, an exceptional player. I think he's definitely going to do better than the majority of people in the Players' Cup. What do you think this knowledge kind of means? Where do we go from here?
Sure. Well, I was thinking before the tournament started, that Well, we were just doing that calculation, right? So like if you just flipped a coin for every round, how many points would you expect to get? And we were just figuring that out, and it's just shy of 2. It's like, what were we saying, 1.8 or something? So that would just be like,
1.87, yeah.
if you were flipping a coin again, like you were saying, okay, I enter 50 tournaments, and then round 1 I win this time, and then I lose, and then I win, and then I lose, and then whatever, and then your bracket goes on. So you'd expect to get about 2 points if you were just doing it random. So of course there's some skill in the there's some skill that you need to
Some skill.
some skill.
Oh, jeez.
There's some deck choice and some metagaming that you need to account for, and obviously the better players are going to do generally better. And so yeah, I mean it's something that you're looking at him finishing with 128 points, and that feels very safe to me, because that is above that kind of 2.5 threshold return per tournament key, right? That'd be points per tournament key above 2.5, and that would be what I would consider a great kind of threshold, like average, right? You definitely are going to have those bad hands in the first round where you're going to lose, and you're definitely going to have those spikes where you just get really lucky and your opponent misclicked and you win the turn. But yeah, I think that is really strong. I was kind of figuring before the whole Players Cup started that we'd be between 90 and 110 to qualify. That felt like a really good number. Again, kind of going back to that little bit of randomization, like if you just were random, like a little bit above that would be enough to get yourself into the second part of the competition. And Ian, again, player I respect, player that is very good, and to hear that he finished with 128 points, I think that that's going to be about the high end of like what the cutoff could be.
No, I definitely think Ian Robb is finishing on the higher end here. We were talking through kind of what that 128 means and represents, and that suggests that more often than not Ian Robb was in the finals of a tournament. Yeah. And so to me, I think if you're more often than not ending in the finals, that should suggest that you're going to make it. Yeah. The counterpoint, though, I always have whenever people are talking about Players' Cups is, we don't really have any metrics for what this is going to look like yet. We're pretty early on. We don't know what the leaderboards are looking like. We don't know how many people are actually actively trying, which will, I think that's going to be the real factor in what the qualification bar is, how many people are actually trying to get it. Regardless, I think Ian Robb definitely has a performance that'll get him into that next stage of the Players' Cup. And I think if you have to rough estimate it, the calc that we ended up with, and I can even just multiply that by 50 here. We're looking at like 94, 95 points is that kind of average performance if you were to flip a coin every single round. Mm-hmm. To me, that seems reasonable to shoot for. I think if you're above 100, above 110, then you should be fine.
Right.
It remains to be seen, don't let me prescribe your Players' Cup for you.
Right.
I think ultimately, try your best, try your hardest, learn from your mistakes, and you'll have a good time. Don't force the issue.
Yeah, and this is again us, like we won't get a very solid speculation on what final results would be. There's a lot of different ways to approach the Players' Cup, as we have talked about on the last podcast. But if you're sitting here now and you're maybe under that threshold, again that kind of 2 points per tournament threshold, like it might be a good time to reevaluate maybe your deck choice, or just kind of take a step back and see how the Players' Cup develops in terms of what the point totals will be. Like at this point, we only have one data set, and it could go a lot of different ways.
For sure. So approaching the Players' Cup, you've played in a couple of the events. I myself am still 50 out of 50 on my keys. Looking at starting this weekend. Is there anything that you've noticed, any trends that you'd recommend following, decks that are seeming to be more popular than average?
I mean, it's been frustrating for me. I won't lie. Let me kind of recount here. I have my
Tales of Woe
workbook. I mean, I've played exclusively Lucario Melmetal and ADP, with ADP being a majority. I've played 13 tournaments so far. I have 16 reps. So that is um, very clearly not, on pace with where I want to be and where I think that I need to be. And that's just me, saying that straight up. And I've certainly had some bad losses in terms of having just unusable starting hands. And it's making me kind of consider, okay, where do I want to go from here? Do I want to continue on this path? Because there is this kind of long form thought where if you just play a deck that you are confident in and you play it for long enough, like your results will kind of buff out and you'll see yourself on the, kind of higher end of things. But at the same token, like 13 tournaments in, I feel as though I have a pretty good amount of data that I can use to make a more informed decision on what I want to play. And so it might be time for a change, or it might be time for just like adding a few techs or something into the ADP or Lucario Melmetal to kind of help with what I've been seeing. So one deck that I've very easily taken the most losses to have seen the most in the tournament, and this is not a shock to anyone, but is ADP. There's been a lot of mirror matches. There have been a lot of people playing ADP in these tournaments, and for good reason, because it's just super consistent. And you don't need me to say why people are playing ADP, but it has absolutely been the deck of choice for many players, and I don't blame them.
Yeah. Is there any other big trend? I mean, everything I followed has kind of suggested ADP has been all over these tournaments. Any other major showings?
Major showings? Can't say that there have been. You have things like Centiskorch that I've seen. You have things like Blacephalon I've seen a couple of times, but for the most part, it's been ADP pretty much. I've seen ADP once a tournament, probably on average, which has been pretty ridiculous.
That is pretty insane. So, if you were to make just a deck recommendation off the top to someone who's listening right now and just has no idea what they want to play, what would that safe pick be? Would it be ADP?
Yes, it would. It would. I mean, I don't want to I think it is like the best deck, and it can beat anything, right? That's the kind of thing that you want. It's consistent. It can beat anything. And it ends the game like rather quickly. Like there's not a ton that you have to like worry about in terms of misplaying. Like the games are very cut and dry, very straightforward, So for those reasons, like of course ADP is going to be a great choice. And then, you look at something like Lucario Melmetal that could have some viability. You look at something like decks that would have a good ADP matchup. Potentially something like, if you are confident in your Centiskorch, which I am not, but if you are confident in your Centiskorch, that some people would argue has a decent ADP matchup, as well as having a decent Eternatus matchup. But Eternatus, I really haven't seen that much.
Do you think that's because people don't think Eternatus is the deck of choice, or they're maybe just opting for ADP?
I don't know. I'm really kind of scratching my head. I've seen Eternatus, I think, one time over 13 tournaments, one time. So I really don't know why that. Two times. Yeah, 2 times over the course of 13 tournaments, and I can't quite put my finger on why. It certainly seems like kind of an outlier there that not a lot of people are playing that deck.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I would have expected a fair amount of Eternatus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like a deck that can hold its own against ADP. Of course, getting that knockout there on the second turn on the ADP is extremely good, but I just haven't seen it. It's hard to say why.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, like the meta of the Players' Cup will more than likely constantly warp and evolve as people play it, and even things that's like the time of day that you're playing might inform the kinds of decks that you're seeing as like different players from different areas pop in and out.
Sure. I think too, another trend that I've personally been seeing is like it's hard, or I think it's easy with excuse me. I think it's easy with a deck like ADP to just play a very consistent like vanilla list. Like you don't really have to do anything too crazy. with ADP, right? You can just play the 4 boss. You know, maybe the craziest decision you have is like, do I want to play for um, Crushing Hammer or for Turbo Patch or for Catcher in my list? Like, that's kind of the sauce, right?
What coin am I
But
flipping today?
what's that?
What coin am I flipping today?
Yeah, what coin am I flipping? Or all of them, if you like to be crazy like Riley. And so, you know, that's kind of a comfort of ADP too, is like the deck is just built in a way that you don't really have to even think about techs. Whereas a lot of the other decks, you have to really think about, you know, particularly Lucario Melmetal. Like, you could play a very straightforward list like Andrew played at the Full Grip Online series last night, which didn't include things like Mewtwo to recycle your supporters, didn't include anything like Weakness Guard Energy, didn't include anything, you know, no Orangaroos or anything. Just it was very consistent, very straightforward. Do you want to go with something like that, or do you want to have things that can counter your bad matchups? You just don't have to think about that with a deck like ADP. I think that's pretty appealing to a lot
It
of players.
sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Not having to think is definitely a plus.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and and it's like at the end of the day, like, this tournament it's a weird one, you know. It's online, so you're not playing against one metagame, you're playing against like 50 individual metagames. You know, it's not a one-day tournament with everybody. It's a weird thing. So like, as much advice as I can give, or that we can give, you know, just take it with a grain of salt, match it up against what you've been seeing, and then just give it your best shot. I do want to say too, I just released a video on YouTube about some things that we were talking about in terms of anxiety related to the Players Cup. I think it's pretty natural to have that kind of anxiety with this kind of event, because you know, you put a lot of emphasis on each of these individual tournaments, and that can be very taxing, right? Because you have a total of 250 points. Like, ideally you finish the Players Cup 2 with 250 points, easily securing, you know, your spot in the next phase. But there are just going to be those times where you dead draw against a great matchup, or you you know, misclick, or, you know, sometimes like your computer will time out or something like that, something you know, out of your control. I talk in that video just a lot about keeping everything in perspective and doing the things that you can control, and then maybe not so much worrying about the things that are out of your control. Like, the matchups are really out of your control, but the things that are in your control, the in-game play and your deck construction, are things that you can, you know, try to work on in the future.
Yeah, and I think you said this in the video, but if I could give any advice, it's, you know, play what you're confident in, play what works for you, take notes on your games, see where things are going well and going poorly, you know, just have good fundamentals, you know, make sure your sequencing is good, take notes of areas where you're maybe not doing it as well. Check your prizes at the start of the game. It's easy as it can possibly be when you're on TCGO, especially on those early turns. So, you know, is take every tournament as an individual step, put your all into it, take the learning experiences that you can out of it and apply it to the next one. And I think even if you don't qualify, you'll get something valuable out of that, right? You'll become a better player at the end of those 50 tournaments. And by Players Cup 3, which, you know, is strongly implied to exist, you know, maybe that's the one for you.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it certainly doesn't feel like this Players Cup is going to be the last one. I mean, that's another important thing to keep in mind, because I think a lot of players, you know, we want that more so in you know, Pokemon than I think a lot of other games. Like, I look particularly at Magic. Like, people play Pokemon primarily for the clout. Like, there is this monetary prize on the line of being able to travel to a, you know, an international championship of your choice. But realistically, you're trying to do well because you want to prove to yourself and you want to prove to the world around you that you're a good player and that you deserve to have, you know, accolades and people look up to you, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is the biggest thing. And just kind of getting caught in that can really lead you down some dark paths. You know, it can really lead you down some very destructive paths where you're kind of, you lose a tournament and you're like, well, I'm not good enough. And that's absolutely not true. Like, these again are kind of crapshoots in the sense that it's a best of one. So it's a best of one where you don't know your opponent's deck list. So, they could just come out with, some tech or some card that you just weren't expecting. I've definitely had that happen to me. Or you lose the coin flip in a matchup where you want to go in a particular turn. And it's a crapshoot at the end of the day. So please, 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 take anything from this discussion on the Players' Cup 2 is don't place your self-worth in how well you do at these tournaments, because that can be very, very destructive.
Yeah, at the end of the day, play because you enjoy it, and play it in the way that you enjoy it, I think is the message that we can drive home.
Yeah, sure.
As we wrap up today, if anyone in the live stream has any questions, you can feel free to leave those. We'll answer a couple of them before we sign off. As always, we appreciate your support. If you're listening on iTunes, feel free to leave a review. It really helps us out, makes us move up a little bit of the tiers in the algorithm, so it's easier to find us.
We love algorithms.
We love the algorithms. We're very algorithmic here. Mm-hmm. And it makes us easier to find and makes us able to better provide more content to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, just while we're on the topic here, or I'm going to go back to the topic. I don't care. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you're the fun aspect of the Players' Cup is like, I was finding myself, I've been on, let's see, over the course, again, I disclosed my point totals, but there was a time where I had like lost 3 in a row in the first round to like very winnable matchups, and I just either had a dead hand or missed a turn. In some cases I intrepid sorted 3 times and like I just needed to hit 1 card and I just didn't do it. It's just like those frustrating games where it's like I should have won. There's a 1% chance that I lose, and it still happened. But in any case, being able to step away from the game, I think, is a really nice thing. Like, avoiding tilt is something that you can do, I generally think, pretty easily in these online Players' Cups. So if you find yourself getting into these tournaments and, maybe you're on a losing streak and you're finding yourself getting really frustrated and annoyed and angry at the game, just take a step back. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be so cutthroat and harsh that you're getting mad at the game. I think that can be really destructive as well. So just avoid that tilt there and step back like I've been doing. I was like really gung-ho, really trying to go for it. Ended up having that little streak of bad luck, and I was just like, okay, you know what? It might be better if I just waited a week and came back to the Players' Cup.
And that's the thing, right? That's the thing about the way this tournament is going, is like you can always just step back and do it another day, unless you're like actually at the end of the timeline there.
Yeah, because at the point that it's not becoming fun, like, you're gonna make more mistakes. You're gonna be tilted.
For sure.
It's just the mistakes are gonna compound on themselves. So don't put yourself in that position.
For sure. We got a couple questions in chat, so we'll get to those before we sign off for the day. We got Losers Are Us asking, what do you think of Salamence? Kind of touched on Salamence earlier. Not really a deck that I would play myself, but it's super, super cool. And that isn't really a demerit to the deck. I think it's actually pretty decent in terms of the more niche VMAX decks. I think it stands up pretty well, and I really enjoy the spread aspect of it.
Mask Dave says, and this is a good question for you, Riley, and I mean for both of us, but I majorly threw a game last night at the Full Grip Online series. Just had to sit back and laugh at myself, try to stay positive. Do either of you have any funny stories of throwing a game that was basically unlosable at a tournament? Do you have any of those times, Riley?
You're asking me that in such a leading way because you know the story that you're thinking of.
Yeah, well.
Yes, I did have a game that was in a completely unlosable game state if I played it out completely normally, and I just got very confused in the early game, and I accidentally tried to set up for a new game by picking up my prize cards, and so I got a double prize penalty for seeing my prize cards. It was just a mess. It was just an absolute mess. So yes, I do have a situation like that. It was at a real tournament in a real location. Uh, it was horrible, absolutely awful. It's very funny though, like looking back, that happened. You know, like what kind of moron picks up their prize cards midway through a game?
I know, right?
You have to be so stupid to do that. But you know, makes for a good story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had one that it just sticks out most to me. I don't know why it sticks out most, but it's just like I always remember this play where it was at a League Cup. Oh no, I have a better one actually. I have a better one that I could share. I have two. Okay, so well no, I'll cut that. I have a better one. Okay, so this is top 8 of a regional in like 2015. I want to say 2015, 2014, 2015, 2016. That, you know, that they all just run together. Anyway, top 8 of a regional, playing against a good friend. I'm up 1-0 in the series. Playing Darkrai Garbodor. They're playing Virizion Genesect. It was that kind of weird period where it was you played standard and then you switched to expanded or something for the second day. And so I had this state where I needed to attack into this one. I made kind of a bad play, but I could have just remedied it by just attacking for the knockout. Instead, I announced the wrong attack. And so I had to perform the wrong attack, which didn't get the knockout, which tilted the prize trade. It was with Absol from Plasma Freeze, and there was one attack where it just is like, it counts the number of, I think, opponent's bench Pokemon, and does like damage based on that. And then the other one looks at the opponent's hand. Well, I had enough energy to complete the attack that looked at the opponent's hand, and I accidentally said it out loud. And then my opponent, you know, well, I was a little tilted at this because they started to move their card to the discard pile, but then they realized that I said the wrong attack, so they put it back in the active and then showed their hand. And I was like, bro, you know what I meant? Like, hey, can you can you move that? Like, I'll take my prize. And then and he's like, no, you said the second attack. I was like a little bit tilted because it was just against a really good friend of mine, and I was like, man, how could you do that to me? And
I mean, you did to yourself.
And we, you know, and I almost like, yeah, that was a really trying time actually. That was probably the saltiest I'd ever been in a tournament, because I just say that, you know, anyway, I lose that game because I make that stupid misplay, and then I go on to lose the second game, and like I get bumped out of cut. And that was a tournament I legitimately thought I could have won because I was kind of like, I had a decent matchup, a good matchup in the next round, and then it would have been a mirror in the finals. So it was just really frustrating, kind of punt that one away in top 8.
You know, actually, I want to build off of that. The worst part about the fact that I lost that game where I picked up my prize cards, and to be fair, you probably should lose a game where you pick up your prize cards by mistake.
Yeah.
But it's a double prize penalty, you know, where they have to take 2 less prizes to win or whatever. And the only reason I actually lost was because I unnecessarily benched an Execute, and they KO'd the Execute with the only Pokemon left in their deck that could attack, and it only did like 50 damage.
That's so sad.
That was actually the worst part of all of that, is if it just didn't bench the Execute. You know, it's one thing to be so stupid that you pick up your prize cards, but then to continue to play bad for the rest of the game is so tilting.
Yeah, that's horrible, man. I feel bad.
So funny. Well, I think there's no better way to wrap up than by reviewing our failures. So thank you all so much, as always. Do rate and review on your podcasting platforms, and we will catch you next time. Peace.
See you guys.